Today we're in Baltimore and we're continuing the history of Baltimore. And I'm with Mr. Rupert Last, who is going to tell us about this village that we have before us. Mr. Last, perhaps you could start by telling us what year this represents?
Yeah, it goes back to about 1930 up until the present time. It's the way it was at that time because now there's more houses here. This is one of the old original farms, Mr. McGarry's.
Okay.
So you come into the village, Mr. Joe Teslock, and another little school, that's the little Catholic school, with the little outhouses behind, you understand? This church, the Catholic church, was built in 1891. It was torn down and a new one was built about in the 1940s, 39 or 40 probably.
And it's not in the same location as this one?
No, it's moved over the other side of the cemetery there now, right? Before this church was built, they used to have a priest come in from St. Pierre and they had their services in Mr. McGarry's house.
Okay.
Before the church was built. This is going back. Mr. McGarry was one of the oldest people here. I found him in the archives in 1851. Mr. James McGarry. That was the grandfather of the man that's there now.
And he's the one who built it?
And he built that house. That's the old original house, and they had their services there.
And of course that was before the church. And then he would have been one of the first houses in Baltimore?
Definitely the first one, yes. His buildings are there now. This was one of the first stores. McCollum's store was going back into the late 17th century, 18 something. The house was here and they owned the store. People from town had to get their goods from town and that.
And this is all part of the McGarry farm?
This is the McGarry farm. This is his barn, and this is Mr. Donovan's house, John Donovan. He's not there now. This is where Denise Wood lived.
Oh yes.
That's her house there now. This is house still this house is still here. It was sold recently. This is the farmhouse from this farm here. Now it's all sold off. It's all subdivided. But
and all residential area now.
All that at that time, This is the Rab sawmill. We used to bring our logs here and roll them down the hill, and they'd saw them and make their lumber and that. And there was a little creek comes through the gully here. The gully was more pronounced then because they later filled it up.
Okay.
But it was a steam engine run by the little stream. Something I want to mention about the mill, it was run by steam, so it had a whistle on it. And when we could hear that, I lived pretty near at La Salette, and we could hear that. They used to blow it in the morning when they started at 7 o'clock or something like that, and again at 12, and then at 6 o'clock. And we could hear that playing. You'd set your clock by that.
I guess. What was the purpose of the whistle? To call the people to work?
I guess so. There was another one up the Swamp Road owned by Mr. Mallon. He used to blow too. He had a sawmill up there. He used to blow too at the time. You'd hear the two of them going. This church hall here, we used to have dances in here all the time, square dances. And every time there was a wedding or something. This is all we had for weddings and.
That was sort of the town hall.
This one on the old Orange Hall.
Oh yeah.
We'd have parties in there, and we used to, and we'd come by horse. We'd leave our horses at Mr. Pincush's in the barn overnight, while we were at the dance, and then go and dance all night, and then go back home 2 o'clock in the morning.
Because the community was mostly farmers,
Oh yeah.
Around here.
There was 3 or 4 farmers right in the village at that time,
Oh, by the way, that one there. And then we go on.
And the Anglican Church, it was built in 1866. It was the first church built here.
And this is where you had your...
And we had the fall fair here for many years before this was built up.
I remember when I visited, the fair was here, near the church.
And the Bonsall store.
Bonsall store, which is McClellan's
now, and
today.
it's all changed because he kept adding to it and that. Mr. Bover, he was a butcher, and he used to drive the logs on the creek when they had the drive on the creek. He used to look after that, and he butchered and things like that. Mr. Rabb had the bank. We had a provincial bank here at that time.
Is this the same Mr. Rabb as the...
he owned the mill, yeah.
The mill?
He owned the mill, and he also had the bank.
The provincial bank.
Provincial bank, we called it. And we used to go, and we used to...
So that, I see you have, we have French names, and we have...
oh, yes.
Bonfil is what, Irish?
Before Mr. no, I believe he was English. Before he bought it, was a Mr. Gagne, I think, owned it at that time.
So that Baltimore at that time was made up of many...
Same as now, mixed. And everybody
Germans
got along.
and Polish and...
Polish, German,
French,
English, Scotch, Irish. Everybody got along, and they still do.
Isn't that something,
you know?
eh? That's beautiful. And this Mr. Tomiewicz?
Mr. Tonkovich, he was the blacksmith.
Oh.
This was the father here, the old Joe Tonkovich, and the son was Johnny. He had the Massey Harris dealership, and he had the Imperial Oil.
Uh-huh.
The old hand
The
pumps.
old hand
the
pump.
old hand pumps there. We used to bring our horses in and take them up and get them shod, get new shoes. Then Johnny could, he could pull your teeth if you wanted to, and cut your hair. He was handy at everything. And this is his house that he built later on. And this,
I recognize
Mr.
that name.
Pinker's he owned most of the land that the village was built on too.
Okay.
Because he had a farm, eh?
So it was part of his farm that was taken to...
yes.
And then we have another school.
Another
the
Protestant school with a little outhouse in the back, and it's still here. It's right beside the old store. Old store is gone, but this is right next to my uncle's here. It's owned by Mr. Philip Cheslock now.
Okay.
And this was another dealership, International Harvester, McCormick Deering. He had dealt in
Farm equipment.
Farm equipment.
And then we have a cheese factory.
Cheese factory.
Is that still here?
No, it was straight across from Renault store, and it burnt down.
On the corner.
They took it. It burnt down.
What's the street? Corner of the street? This street
307. This is 307 comes up here. And
Okay.
this is Chemin goes ahead down to the La Salette.
Oui. Chemin du Pont?
Oui.
Okay.
And this is Mr. Adlor Basra. He used to draw wood, and he used to go to town for goods for the storekeepers.
Okay.
He drew all their equipment up. Now Mrs. Renault, Madame Renault, Madame Tongovich, and Madame Wabor, they were all sisters of Mrs. Adlor Brassard. They were the main ladies of the village. They do sewing and all this, and it was quite something, you know.
The real village life was an active village life, eh?
And this was another man,
Mason or
Mr.
Masson?
Mason. I don't know what he did really. He was retired by the time I knew him. And this was another farm where Mrs. Raven is now. It was owned by Thomas Bigelow. And that actually was the first hotel in Baltimore.
The first hotel?
Back in
Before the other one?
Oh yes, the other one was built only in 1940 or something like that.
Okay.
This one was on the go by Mr. Pichi, owned it.
Okay.
Mr. Masno Pichi. And it was on the go back in 1870 or something like that. And this was an Orange Hall now. It was a lodge, an association sort of. And they had that, and now it's Time Out. It's the Time Out restaurant now.
Restaurant. Yeah, we had one everywhere, the Orange Lodge,
Yeah,
eh? There was always...
Yeah, it was like the Knights of Columbus. So that's...
Tell me, Mr. Lass, what prompted you to build this village?
Well, I wanted the children, today's children, to have an idea of what it looked like back then, and I thought it'd be interesting for them, new generations.
It must have been interesting for you to build this.
It was.
A challenge?
I had to dig up a few pictures of the people that let me have, and most of it I can remember.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Lass.
Okay,
That was very interesting.